Hola, ¿qué tal? Bienvenido. It's Harrison here, and I'm actually on the west coast of Mexico. It's a lovely town here, with beautiful beach, and hopefully you can still hear me through the sounds of the wave. And a few days ago, I sent out an email to my list asking about basically the biggest challenges that some of you might be facing in learning Spanish. And one topic that came up a lot was the topic of listening. And today I want to address one of those challenges that I think describes a very specific problem, specific challenge, and also very, very common. Basically, it's the idea that how do you deal with, when you're listening to Spanish, what happens if you get stuck on one word and then that causes you to miss out on the rest of the sentences? Because when perhaps, oh, what was that word about? What does that word mean? And by the time you figure it out or realize that you've been thinking about that word, the speaker has already moved on to a few sentences down, down the speech, right? So it's a very frustrating issue, and obviously it affects your Spanish listening. So the first thing I want to share about that is a bigger problem when you're listening to let's say a Spanish video, TV show, or movie. It's a little bit of a smaller problem when you're talking to someone, especially on a one-on-one basis in person. Why? Well, because if you're talking to someone in person and you run into a word that you don't understand, you can ask, right? Perdón, ¿qué es? And then you ask about the word that you didn't understand. Perhaps, they were mentioning a noun that you simply don't know, or a verb that you haven't heard of in the past. Perdón, ¿qué es un dorado? For example, dorado, it's the dish that I ate the other day. I had no idea that was the name of a fish. I thought it was a color, right? But in this context, it was referring to the name of that fish. So I had to clarify that, and very common because as Spanish learners, it's very hard for us to get to know all the words that are commonly used in Spanish. Sooner or later, you'll run into words that you don't know. So the point is, when you're speaking to someone on a one-on-one basis, or even you're talking to a group, right? Perhaps it's a small group, 2 or 3 people, it's totally okay to clarify. Perdón, ¿qué es? And then you insert the word that you don't know. And I would say that's the case for in-person, small, kind of intimate setting. Feel free to interrupt, feel free to ask. I think it makes the speaker more, engaged as well, because you're showing that you're listening, right? And you're clarifying things that you don't understand. Now, the challenge really comes when you're listening to, let's say, a video, or it's a large group and the speaker is, talking on stage, and obviously there's no, practical way for you to interrupt the entire group to ask about one word, right? Or perhaps do it multiple times. So here, the common trap is that you get stuck on one word and then you're trying to figure it out, because it is important. Some of the words are important and affects your understanding of the entire speech or entire video. But the bigger risk here is when you get stuck on one word, you lose track of the entire, basically all the rest of the context. So here, what I would really recommend is to train and to practice not getting stuck on one particular word, but instead focus on the context, focus on what the speaker is saying, in the bigger picture, perhaps with the help of other words, other sentences down the road, you can actually guess what they're talking about earlier. So that's my suggestion. And also, it's another thing to train yourself to listen to the context, because sometimes when Spanish speakers are speaking really fast, which they almost always do, there are just times that you can't understand every single word, and these are the times that it's really important that you can pick up keywords and to basically get an idea of what they're talking about. And sometimes just that idea can help you carry the conversation forward, to reply, and basically get the outcome, right, that you're looking for, to understand what they're talking about. And to do that, there are obviously methods. There's actually one method that I use in my listening program, which is called the Spanish Listening Made Easy. If you don't know what it is, I'm gonna link it right below this video. So basically, it's a way to manipulate speed in your listening practice to train your brain not getting stuck on one particular word, but instead focus on the context, focus on the bigger picture, so that you're not trying to translate every single word, but instead being able to, listen to a sentence, listen to a paragraph, a clip, focusing on the keywords that the speaker is saying, that so that you're able to extract the bigger picture and understand the clip to the best of your ability. So that's a method that I highly recommend. A lot of people have told me that it really helped them to get rid of the bad habit of trying to translate every single word when they're listening to Spanish. So that's kind of the biggest idea that I want to share. And one more thing, or actually two more things. One is that I would say embrace situations where you simply won't be able to understand everything. For example, I've been living in Mexico for 4 years, and obviously learning Spanish, spending lots of time and dedicating time to this. But there are still a lot of situations where I simply don't understand stuff, especially in contexts that I'm not familiar with the subject, I'm not familiar with the vocabulary. For example, just the other day I was, overhearing conversation of between two doctors. They're talking about some conditions, some diseases, some medicines. I'll be honest, I know that's pretty much the extent that I understand, what they were talking about. Beyond that, not much. Specific diseases, I don't know. What medicine do they just prescribe? I really have no idea. But I would say these are some of the situations where you just have to embrace. Okay, that's a little bit beyond my level. That's a little bit beyond my knowledge, my Spanish vocabulary, and I'm just gonna accept that I won't be able to understand. And if I do need to understand, let's say I'm going to the doctor and I need to understand what's happening with my body, then I can ask, right? Perdón, ¿qué es? Insert the word. And perhaps it's the word of the medication, perhaps it's the word of a body part, right? You want to know which body part that the doctor is referring to, then you can ask about that. So that's something that I want to share. And also, one last thing, listening is a long journey, right? It has a lot to do with your general Spanish knowledge, which in this case is, vocabulary plays a big part. And not just vocabulary, like how many words you know, but also how many vocabulary that you can recognize in listening. So it's not just enough to know a word, let's say, I don't know, like calves, right? Pantorrilla. It's not just enough that you know this word, but also you are familiar with this word enough so that when you hear this word in a context, you're able to recognize it. So that takes practice, right? That takes time, practice, repetition, and all of this is a process. So I would say be patient with yourself. Don't try to push through the process or push through, rush the process. And also sometimes you just have to, like I said earlier, right, accept that some situations are just beyond your level or beyond your Spanish knowledge. And in those situations, a bit of patience is always welcome. And like I said, this is one very specific challenge that that was reading through all the replies, and I saw this. I thought it was a really good topic to make a video on. And it's also a very common one. A lot of people are struggling with translating Spanish in their head, either in speaking or in listening. And the method that I was sharing with you earlier, the speed adaptation method that we use inside our program, Spanish Listening Made Easy, is really a way to help us get over this bad habit so that when we are listening, we're not getting stuck on individual words. And again, if you don't have that program, or if you're interested to learning more about that program, I'm gonna link it down below as well. So saludos desde la costa de México. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.